Copes. I'm a senior marketing major at the Best Howard University. And so I'm going to be moderating today. Can all of our panelists tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got there?
Sure, I can start. My name is Erica Varela. I am a Howard alum, so shout out to you, Kaylee. I am from Miami, Florida, currently based in Brooklyn. I'm an HR generalist at Major League Baseball. Started off my career in hospitality, transferred into venue management, and what I figured I loved the most about what I was doing was everything HR related. So I transitioned into HR at Barclays Center, and I'm coming up on 1 year with baseball. Super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Christina Akis. I am with Octagon, Sports Entertainment Network. I'm the VP of Research sitting in our strategy arm. I actually came over to Octagon about 1.5 years ago from our sister agency that specialized in media overall. I also lead our Black Employee Network that we launched last year. And I'm a Temple University alum, so not necessarily HBCU, but love you guys and probably spent more time on some of y'all campuses than my own, so.
Good afternoon. I'm Inyaka Nalamti. I am a licensed psychologist with a sports psych background. I am the Vice President of Wellness and Clinical Services with the National Football League. I've been in my role here at the NFL for about 1 year and 8 months and came into this position from the NFL Players Association, where I was the Director of Player Wellness for a little bit over 2.5 years. And before that was in private practice and worked as a psychologist in college counseling centers, as well as I was an assistant professor of psychology. Did my doc work at Temple. I did not go to an HBCU, but I explained that I grew up in 3 HBCU towns. So Tuskegee, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, and Orangeburg, South Carolina. So definitely feel passionately about the opportunity to speak with you all today.
That's great. So I want to get right into the questions. So how important is it for organizations to have a safe space for minorities to be able to speak and voice their opinions or frustrations without fear of repercussions?
I'll start that. And again, my experience after coming over to Octagon and launching our Black Employee Network, it's extremely important. I think, especially with the recent events within our country, what we're seeing even more is that safe space is required, right? A lot of the times, especially our Black employees, we've had to code switch or kind of leave our full selves at home and come into the workplace. And right now, whether it's because we've all been at home and home has turned into the workplace, psychologically, we've gone through a lot. Leaving ourselves at home to come to work was not an option anymore for us, and coming to work was us being our full authentic selves and still experiencing the traumas of outside in our homes. And I think the only way that we can continue to do our best jobs is if we are in an environment that sees us, feels us, and is supportive of us. It also provides us the opportunity to speak amongst ourselves. Our Black Employee Network does have members who do not necessarily identify as Black, but are our allies. But we have opportunities in which we can just speak amongst ourselves, and that's important, right? It's kind of releasing the tensions that we sometimes feel, and it's also an opportunity for us to identify if there are issues within the organization, right? I think sometimes we think, especially as some Black women, it's like, was I being angry? Like, was it me? Is it them? Like, am I bugging? And that safe space, that employee network allows us to kind of come to the table with our truths and our honesty and understanding if it is a more of a organizational issue that we should focus on and change. So it's extremely important for us to have safe spaces within our organizations and to be supported by leadership in order to have those spaces.
Absolutely.
I definitely echo Christina's sentiments. As she mentioned, due to the pandemic, a lot of us are now working from home and our personal lives blend with our work lives, right? So all of this stuff is going on around us and we can't turn off how we feel once it's time to log into Zoom, to connect with your team. And And to separate those things, it's nearly impossible. When employees are able to bring their whole selves to work by having that safe space, the organization gets more. And something else that Christina mentioned that's extremely important is not only having those business resource groups in place, but having the support from senior leadership, because it's almost worse than not having the groups at all. To have the groups and you don't have the support to put forth ideas and initiatives that can really help support the employees. I mean, they're going to get their payback, right? The productivity will be up if employees feel like they can be themselves at work. So it's extremely important. I've noticed a lot of organizations going that route of having these employee resource groups, not just for Black and minority groups, but for other groups as well. You know, you may not identify with this group, but you may identify with that one. And you don't have to identify with the group. You can join just by virtue of wanting to be an ally. So it's extremely important for the wellness of employees to have those safe spaces.
And as a clinician on the call, I would echo the sentiment. You know, the idea of being able to say, here are people who look like me or understand some of the struggles, and recognize that there is value in being able to create that space to address those things, I think is important. I think it also gives you some indication of how invested the organization is in the well-being of, and both the recognition of some of the differences of their employees and then in their well-being. I think one of the areas that I would caution though is, I think it's also important for those groups to be purposeful, right? Because I think, you know, to Erica's point, you're seeing a lot more now as we're talking about, you know, diversity and inclusion out in the larger space. You're seeing a lot more organizations that are saying, okay, we need to put this in place, but do they have the right infrastructure? Do they have the right guidance? Are they building it so that it's purposeful versus it becoming a venting session where, you know, you kind of come in, everyone dumps, and then you walk away and nothing gets solved. And so I think that it's really important to make sure that there's the right guidance and people have the right skill set and the support from the overall organization so that it can also be solution focused.
Right. And Christina, you touched on a big thing, like, am I being angry or is it just them? And so how do you think that Black women can break through that stigma of us being the angry Black woman and trying to prove ourselves in our field?
Ooh, I think it's two parts. I don't think it's our problem to solve, right? Let's start there. The stigma of being an angry Black woman is not something we put on ourselves. So that perception is coming from the person that is interacting with us. What I would say, and it goes to the point of let's make sure that we're constantly being solution oriented, is there is a point in time where we come to a point of how can we educate those around us for them to understand, right, that it's not an angry Black woman, it's me, and I'm determined and I know what I want and I'm going to ask for what I want the same way a male would. So I think the burden sometimes will fall on us in regards to education, but I don't think it is something that we should suffer with. You know, be yourself. Be yourself, and at the end of the day, you know, if someone needs clarification on where you are coming from, if we already know that stigma is on us, the bigger thing to do is to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, here's where you've misunderstood me. Maybe not with those words, but here's where you've misunderstood me, you know, and here's what I was trying to get at. You know, if it came across a different way, understandable, but here's what I still need done. Here's still how I felt about this. And it might just be reiterating what you need in a different way. And that would come from anything, right? If someone doesn't understand something, if someone's taken aback by something, they just aren't understanding of it. So I would, if you really want to get to a point of productivity and be solution oriented, we kind of have to take that burden of education and reinterpreting recommunicating what we need. But it's the overarching problem is not ours to fix. And we have to continue to be committed to who we are and showing up.
Agreed.
Definitely agree with that. It's not our responsibility to fix how someone perceives us based on their biases. Something that has helped me is, you know, just trying not to lead with emotion and sticking to the issue at hand, presenting facts to support whatever it is, you know, you're presenting, or whatever your argument is, whatever you're challenging. by, you know, giving supporting information, now it removes the opinion from it, and nobody really can argue facts, right? So again, it's not our responsibility, you know, to manage how people perceive us, you know, but also to Christina's point, like, don't back down for the sake of someone else's comfort, right? If you know that you're right, if you're confident in what it is that you're asking for, or the point that you're trying to make, stick to it. Just support it with facts and don't lead with emotion.
And I would, sorry, just to harp on that, I think identify those that are committed to misunderstanding you, because that's going to be consistently fighting a battle, and that's where you get emotional, and that's where you start to get distraught. Identify others that you can go to when, as we are in regards to being solution oriented, because there will be some individuals that are really just committed to misunderstanding you, and that's not the battle you should have to take on at work.
And I definitely agree with both what Christina offered and Eric offered. I'd say also start with self-awareness, right? So I'll be honest. So, you know, I think people think because I'm a psychologist, they expect me to be warm and fuzzy. And I am not warm and fuzzy, and I am very passionate about my work and what I do. And I am, you know, I put my head down and I get things done. And I will say that, and for most of my career, I worked pretty autonomously. So I didn't have to necessarily navigate sort of the politics and you know, dealing with some of those things. And I will say that there are times when I am angry, and I am working to learn how to manage that. So part of it is also checking in with me, right? And saying, okay, so what's going on with me? How am I feeling? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? That doesn't mean that I then need to apologize and make someone else feel safer or better. But I think it's both the sort of that self-check. It's being able to say, let me look at my environment, who around me is committed to misunderstanding me, right? Because those are things that I don't want to spend my energy trying to change. So I think it's a little bit of both of those things. You know, I've got a former colleague he will tell me, like, there are times when you come in and you turn over tables, right? And so I have to learn to kind of, okay, to Erica's point, like, stick to the facts. Let's be very objective. And that means that it's going to take me much more time on the front end, right, to build all of that, so that then I can come in and be that very objective, very unemotional, very neutral person when I need to.
Those are all really good points. And I really like the theme of never be scared to do what you want to do, and never be scared of what they're going to perceive you as. So when it comes to trying to have difficult conversations, for example, negotiating your salary, how do you do that in a way that they're not like, oh, well, she's a woman, like, she should always be paid less than? How do you do that in a way that you're getting what you want in an effective manner?
I guess I can start. This is probably one area that I've had to work on even up until now. And I'm a VP at this point, and I think I still sometimes enter conversations. You know, like I said, I started Octagon about 1.5 years ago, and it was actually one of my really close male friends who was like, no, go in and ask for what you want. And I was like, well, no, because I'm just coming over. Like, I don't know. I'm happy for the opportunity. And it was really him that was like, no, like, ask for what you want. And I had to be stern, but it was really like having a conversation with myself to build up my confidence. And I think for some reason, as women, for the majority, we do, right? We're paid less. And I don't know if a part of that is also because that's always been the case. Sometimes we don't even have a gauge of what we should be asking for, right? I don't know how much my male colleagues and counterparts are paid. And so even not having insight into that and not understanding that will always leave me in the dark. But I think even without that bit of information, you have to go in and ask for what you think you are valued for. And I think it's really about having the confidence. It's going in, and I am very adamant about having to show your value, right? So, and I walk into meetings like, you might not like me, but you're going to love my work. And that's what you're going to pay me for. We may not be best friends. but you are going to love what I do, and here's what I do, and here's how much I expect to get paid for it. But I will say that I don't think it's been the easiest conversation for me. And I have a lot of the hard conversations at work. And when it comes to money, for some reason, I'm just like, no, they'll give me whatever. But I will say, I think having that a male friend even kind of be my cheerleader and having that support system has really helped me. So I think it's also having people in your corner who can help push you and help you show your value, I think is very important. But you have to go in, and look, my mother's motto is, you're already at no, right? So unless you go in and ask for it, they're not going to offer it for the most part. So you're already at no. You can't be scared for no, and you can't be scared to negotiate. So it's their job, you know, I don't mean to downplay any organization, but right, it's their job to get the most work done at the least amount of money. You're right. So that's their job. And it's your job as your own brand to get paid properly for what you're doing. So go in, and even if you feel like they can't commit to that originally, then you need to make a plan, and you need to have them commit to the plan of, okay, well then what do we do in 6 months? What are the goals that I should be achieving, and the goals that you should be achieving to help get me there so that we can renegotiate my salary? Have a plan, stick to it, and have them commit to it.
Completely agree. And some other HR professionals might cringe when they hear me say this, but we should normalize discussing our salaries with our counterparts, so we know at least what the baseline is. What is the average? What I should be paying? Do your research. Look at what people are offering in other organizations of your size. And not only for negotiating like a raise, but going into a new role, right? There may be a salary cap. Maybe they can't offer you more money, but there are other benefits that you can ask for, like a stipend for commuting, or, you know, lunch, or reimbursement for trainings or tuition. Like there's other ways to get what you want. But in terms of having that conversation, showing your value, quantifying it, cost savings, whatever it is that you were able to do in your role, and planning in advance, right? The conversation's already going to be hard, but if you've outlined your value, if you've put some bullet points together and you stick to what you're going to say, just like Christina said, and be prepared for the no, but be able to follow up and say, hey, we had this discussion, this is what you said, and, you know, hold people accountable for it. Definitely a hard conversation to have. It's never going to be easy, but the more prepared you are, the better off you are.
You know, I think, you know, Christina and Erica both, I think that they've covered most of it, all of it. I do think this is where particularly women benefit from having male mentors. So what I've learned to do is I'm going to do all the research, gather as much data as I can find to figure out exactly what the range is for this position. And one of my male mentors said, and then you need to have a number in mind. Be very clear about what that is, and that's what you ask for. Don't back down, and then you negotiate from there. But have a very clear number in mind before you sit down at the table. And I don't think that women are necessarily taught that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know I personally wasn't taught that. So like hearing from you all is amazing. So I want to talk a little bit more about your roles in your company. So what's a fun project that you've done that you felt like everybody should know about? That you're just like, oh wow, like I really snapped on this one. Like you know, you can
I guess something that comes to top of, I still consider myself fairly new. I'm coming up on my year in October, and it feels like I've been there for so long, but as soon as I got comfortable in my role, COVID happened, and we had to, you know, everything we said we were going to do for the year, we had to adjust because that no longer made sense. One of the biggest things for me that I've been tasked with is revamping our onboarding program. And with, you know, me leading, my team supporting, we've been able to do a lot. So looking back at what it was from when I started, just making employees feel welcome as soon as they get to baseball and transitioning them into their teams. For me, I'm super proud of that. I mean, it's only been my first year, and that was top of list, the first, priority for us. So that's something that I've worked on that I'm extremely proud of.
I think for me, for one of our automobile clients, I worked on, so essentially I'm a woman in sports and I'm also a woman in data and strategy. So I'm a lot of the times the only female and Black female at that. And one of the projects, which was really, really awesome, my background again is in measurement from a media standpoint. So coming over to sports, I'm now measuring activations and sponsorships. So things that can't be tagged in the traditional sense that digital media could be tagged. So we were developing basically a big data strategy for one of our clients. And what that entailed was having to identify the data gaps that existed. So we had to identify ways that we can capture data amongst our event attendees to compile it and collect it and compile it and clean it and put it in a big data strategy so that we can start optimizing how we go to market and how we execute our events. And one of the awesome parts of it was creating this measurement and learning plan that had multiple layers to it. So one of it was like your standard surveys. One of it was actually location-based tracking. So we were able to identify people that came to the event via their mobile device, and we can understand not just their demographics based off of who they were and the information that we were able to gather from their phones, but also like, did they go to the automaker's website later that day or even in the next week? Did they build a car on the website? So we were actually able to really track the impact of our sponsorship events based off of the digital data that we were able to collect. And one of the other elements that we were vetting but didn't do, which was kind of sad, was we would have been able to also look at eye tracking. So the event was at a racetrack, so we would be able to identify if people were actually looking at any of our branded assets along the racetrack, and we could actually measure it. We're able to do that from a television standpoint, identifying where the cameras were, but we would have been able to do it on site utilizing goggles or glasses that people would wear along the racetrack, and we can identify the assets. But it was a 4-day event, and we were like, we can't ask all these people over 4 days to wear these glasses. But it was an awesome, awesome, innovative way to measure activations, and our client just fell in love with it. So that was an awesome project.
I had to think. I was like, what's cool? I tell people that my job sounds sexy, but it's not really as sexy as it sounds. So a little bit of background. So I mentioned that I came to the NFL from the NFL Players Association. So in that role, I basically did the same thing that I do here, but as at the PA, you're supporting the players directly. And so now that I'm at the league, I am basically supporting the clubs. So you go from sort of, labor to management, which is an interesting sort of contrast. But one of the things that I am super proud of is, so in May of last year, May of 2019, we passed, the NFL and the NFL Players Association passed a behavioral health agreement, basically, that requires every single club to have a mental health clinician that is integrated into the club. And so, so they have to be there at least 8 to 12 hours a week, 2 days a week. They have to, there's certain tasks that they are provided with. And really the idea is, how do we make sure that we are prioritizing mental health as much as we're prioritizing physical health, right? And so, if we want to get people to perform well, we have to take this holistic approach, and making sure that those resources are there is vital. And so that was passed last May. So now we're a year and a half after that agreement. So it's fully integrated into the collective bargaining agreement. And so I think that's one of the things I feel really good about, is being able to contribute to basically, providing this holistic approach to care for players in the National Football League. And it's exciting to sort of see some of we're seeing more and more people and more professional athletes who are willing to talk about, building a positive mental health. And so that's one of the things that I think is pretty cool.
I love it. All of you have really great jobs. So how, since COVID has happened, and a lot of sports they're all starting back up. So how has that been in all of your different roles? How has it been trying to make sure that you stay safe, but also you're doing your job in the best way.
When you say staying safe,
Anybody.
like from COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, our organization, or at least within Octagon, has been very, has just been awesome in regards to like ensuring that their employees are safe. So, you know, we're all working remotely. I think, you know, even the conversations are kind of like, we'll just wait until 2021 to even reconsider getting back in the office. You know, and I think another awesome, you know, element to this is that, and this is what makes the organization you work for is very, very important. You know, Octagon has been awesome in just ensuring that like our employee morale has been as good as it can be, right? So even, you know, within our D&I groups, but also just overall. So like I also sit on another committee for employee morale. And it's really like, you know, how do we ensure that the parents are okay? I'm a mom of a 5-year-old. So there have been weeks where I was like, I need a mental health week. I used to do mental health days and just disconnect. Now I'm like, I need a whole week. Like I can't, and no one bats an eye. I mean, I don't think so. I haven't asked, but really like I needed that time. I can probably say like every other month, I'm like, I just need a week off because, you know, I need to be okay. So staying safe for me has definitely been a mental energy protected versus physical, right? I've done all the phys. I have my masks, I have my gloves, I stayed indoors. I did that, and you know, our company has ensured that we don't come into the office and so forth. But I think the harder part was making sure that I stayed mentally safe and healthy, and that has been hard, right? But again, that's what makes the company that you work for so important, because you know, the horror stories that I have heard, you know, over the last few months of people getting in trouble because their kid is in the background. I'm like, thank goodness school just opened back up, because you guys would have seen my 5-year-old sitting right on my lap. She takes every opportunity to come into a camera. And, you know, it's, you know, our pre-meet, I think we all saw her, and she plays with my clip and weave, and she runs around like she's a hot mess, right? But she's, oh, that girl. But, you know, she does that during work hours and no one bats an eye. And it's so important, and that has helped so much. So I think just having the support system, and that's, you know, one of those things, again, the safe spaces, like make sure your entire organization is a safe space in some capacity, because you need that in order to just be productive and to just survive right now. So that's what I've done. I've taken weeks off and disconnected when I needed to. And, you know, the work has gotten done. But again, the leadership within our organization has, you know, when things happened, it was kind of like, take tomorrow off. Like if you are distracted, take tomorrow off. And I must commend them for that, and have been appreciative of it, because I don't think it would have been so easy if I didn't have an organization that was so supportive in that frame.
Definitely.
I have to say the same. Baseball is more on the conservative side when it comes to working from home and the like. And we had to make the transition very quickly, and we did. And, you know, we've been super productive. Also, to Christina's point, mental health was most important. I don't have any children, but I do live with my partner. And we were just in the house. If we needed to get outside, we would take walks, wear masks, healthy, and all of that stuff. Mental health was important. And protecting your peace and having to show up at work, again, there's that blend, right? Things are going on at home in the environment with our families, and the organization overall, but specifically my team, has been great in supporting one another in those types of things. So if you're logged into the call and you're not looking like you're okay, checking in, hey, is everything all right? Do you need the rest of the day? You know, the mental health week thing is important. And if my boss is listening, I may need one soon. But, you know, they've also implemented things like unlimited sick time, because employees may have used up their sick time in the first quarter, and then COVID hits and you may need extra sick time. So that's something that was done. And, you know, as in New York, we've gotten more comfortable with going outside, we've reopened the office on a voluntary basis. So while people are not required to go in, our office operations team has been there making sure that for the employees that do want to come in, they feel safe. So they provided return to work kits, which includes thermometers, branded masks, hand sanitizer for your desk, things of that nature. Our insurance company has given us telehealth options for mental health check-ins with a psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever you want to talk to. So there are a bunch of different things that are happening with the organization overall and with specific teams. People have been super supportive, and I think that's what's most important, right? Even if you're not using these resources, just knowing that they're there, they're available, that you can ask for them and not feel ashamed, that you can ask for a day off and not feel like you're getting dinged. So, MLB has done a great job. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else during this time. I say all the time that New York was probably the worst off, and I felt most comfortable in New York. I kind of feel the same way about my organization. When I hear my colleagues talking about other organizations that I've worked in the past, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys have gotten that much communication, that they're making all of these adjustments to make sure that you all are comfortable. So I'm definitely in the right place.
Yeah, I think for us, so we're playing football in a pandemic. And so, there's the how do you take care of the people who work in the building, because we are back in the office. I'm actually in the office now. But they've set up a structure where, depending on where you work and what your space looks like, there's flexibility, there's testing. They've provided reimbursements for folks to take Ubers as opposed to taking the subway. So trying to figure out how to make the space as safe as possible. But then I think a couple of things that you guys both mentioned, as a mental health professional, I think every mental health professional at this point is pretty overloaded. I think one of the things that the pandemic has done is it's in some ways it's normalized the idea that it's probably helpful to talk to somebody. And so the question is then, what are some of the things that the organization has done? So they've got Calm app for employees and all of these things to make sure that, again, their support there. But then part of my role is working with all of the mental health clinics. And so what we've had to do is, okay, so what's the protocol? How are you going to manage?
I think you're muted.
So what's the protocol that we're going to use to make sure that we're providing the best mental health support for players who test positive or who have family members who test positive? Or if there's staff who test positive, who's your backup if you end up testing positive? So what we've really had to work on is how do we make sure that we are also providing the best care for the players at each and the staff at each of the clubs, because, to be able to function sort of as close to normally as possible with this sport that's in season right now, it requires everybody to kind of make that a first priority. So it's been the physical health support, but it's also been the mental health support and providing the support to the caregivers as well, right? Because one of the things we talk about is compassion fatigue. If your job is kind of supporting other people, then making sure that becomes exhausting. So making sure that you're taking care of yourselves. So it's all of those. It's on multiple levels. So for some folks, the pandemic has decreased their workload, and for some people, it's really increased it. And I'd say, like HR people, like all of that, you're probably working almost twice as hard as you were before, or at least spending as almost twice as many hours. And so making sure that there's a little bit of a balance.
Right. These are really great points. And I'm definitely myself going to look into companies who care, who really are making sure that my mental health and I'm in a safe space. So what advice would each of you give to a young woman who's trying to pursue a career in sports?
How long we have?
We have another 30 minutes. So,
and I think this goes for any career, but especially within sports, as we've just spoken about. Our industry is already heavily male dominant. Finding an organization that cares about you, that cares about you as an employee, that cares about you as a woman, that cares about you as a Black woman, if you're such, or whatever you identify, any additional demographic that you want to throw on there you have to find the organization that cares. I'm a big advocate of finding the company that you want to work for and then finding the job. Because it's much easier to switch jobs within an organization, especially a great organization, because if they like you and they see your value, they will allow you to switch roles and try additional roles. I think it's much easier to be within an organization that is supportive and identify the best role that you want to be in, especially when you're just starting out, versus chasing a specific role and then ending up at a bad organization. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is do the research behind the organizations, talk to people there, talk to people who look like you there, reach out on LinkedIn, that's what it's there for, right? Reach out, do your research, identify the organization that you want to work with, and then find the opportunity and the role that's most closely aligned to even what you may think you want to do. Because I think, a lot of times we switch the paths within our career. So, find the organization first. And do your due diligence.
I'd say my biggest piece of advice is don't be intimidated by the name or knowing that you will likely be a minority. And I speak specifically to my experience in applying for this role at Major League Baseball. We know historically the demographics are not very diverse, but I understood that I had value and that I was confident in my capabilities, that my perspective was valuable. And I didn't let it stop me from applying or, thinking that I was good enough for the role, for the organization. So don't be intimidated. These are the type of opportunities that we have to speak up on behalf of other people who might be afraid. And to Christina's point, definitely reach out to people on LinkedIn. I, in the past, was never comfortable enough to just cold connect with someone that I've never met with before or had a conversation with or saw, any of their work. But over the past couple of years, even before my role here, college students have reached out to me on LinkedIn like, hey, just getting into the workforce. And there's a lot of spam in there as well, but I make it a point to respond to people because I remember what it was like. Not knowing where to start, right? You're applying for all these jobs through Indeed, through all these job boards, these links, and you're like, is anyone even gonna see my application? So I do respond if anyone on this call wants to reach out to me. Something else that's important to understand is, and I think we spoke about this on our pre-call and in my friend groups, that when it comes to sports, minorities tend to wanna either play or be an agent. And it's important to understand that these organizations are like other regular businesses, right? They have a bunch of other departments, a bunch of different roles that need to be filled. So if you're in the School of Business and you're studying accounting and finance, there are roles like that. If you are in tech, there are roles like that. Information security, legal, essentially everything that you would apply for at a normal, or a non-sports related company, and NFL, NBA, MLB, we all have those roles. So don't be afraid. What you have to give, what you can bring to the table is just as valuable as anybody else.
And I probably have a little bit of a different take. And that's because I'm approached a lot by, people who, college students or young folks who want to go into sports, and and my suggestion is always know your why, right? Like that self-awareness piece. The first question I ask is why, right? It is again, like I think that the perception is sometimes sexier than the reality, right? So it's to sort of say, hey, I think I want to work for this big name company, but to realize that what happens behind the scenes is very different from what you see on the outside. And so what I realized is that, it was never a goal for me to work for the NFL. Like, it never crossed my mind. My first experience was, I was a student athlete. I was interested in sports psychology. I did a master's in sports psychology. I ended up working with mostly, young boys when I started out in my career, and my career trajectory has sort of opened the doors to put me in to put me in this place. And so I love what I do. And I think, and I'm fortunate to be able to do it in this organization where it's a tremendous platform and we can do so much on a higher level. So, my suggestion is always start, think about who you are, what are your needs, what are your passions, what are the things that you enjoy. And not to say that it's always going to be easy and you always love it, because there are days where I'm like, what was I thinking? But being able to let that drive you versus, well, it looks like it'd be awesome to get to go to a Super Bowl. Making sure that you understand at the core why it is that you are pursuing this position or this company or what it is that you're doing. I know those are all over the place, but
you answered it. So those are all great.
I do want to echo. Sorry, can I want to echo?
Yeah.
Use your network. All right, the number of non-Black employees that have gotten in the doors just because their uncle works there, or the CEO is a friend of a friend from the golf course. Use your networks. Reach out. Don't be scared to reach out. Erica, I've received plenty of free cups of coffee to just meet up with a college student that wanted to talk about, my career path. I should probably send them that money back for that coffee. But I know how that felt. I was LinkedIn around when I don't think LinkedIn was around when I first started my career. So I don't even think I had that resource. And it really was just like, talk to anyone that I can find. Use your networks, rely on them, get the information, do the research, find your why, but use your networks, use your connections to get your foot in the door and to understand why you even want to be in sports, right? Get that full picture of what the industry looks like. And last piece, the educate portion of this summit is what hits home for me, because I constantly I'm perplexed by the lack of Black employees that we have in sports, knowing that we are some of the biggest demographic of the players and the athletes and the consumers. And it boggles my mind when I look around the room and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. They're making decisions for this league that's primarily Black, and there are no Black people here. But I think the education part is what misses. And I don't think people understand that there are all these other roles within sports, right? I didn't know, I consider myself to have a great upbringing. I've been on the golf courses, and I still didn't know what, I was like, strategy for a sports agency. Like, what do they do? I was recruited for my role just because of my research background. And when I dug into it, I was like, oh, that is awesome. Who knew that role existed? And then my first week of talking to people, I'm like, all of these jobs in sport, like I would have never known. And I think it's so important for us to kind of give back, and even beyond the college level. Like, my biggest thing right now is, how do we get into high schools and let them know that these career opportunities exist within sports? So they're not looking at it as they just want to be a player or agent, because that mentality starts very early on, because that's what they're exposed to, right? And exposure is very big. So if we can expose even our younger Black community as to the opportunities that lie in sports, I think then our talent pool gets bigger, because they know what to look for, right? And they're more diligent in the search, and there can't be the response from that, mimics Wells Fargo CEO, right? The talent pool is there. I just think sometimes we don't know the opportunities that lie ahead of us. So I think it's really important to do the research and try, to give back. But again, I am here as well. If you find me on LinkedIn, I'm always, it's virtual coffee now, so I guess I'll buy my own coffee. But it's so important to use your network.
I agree. So now we're going to get into questions. We actually already have some questions in the chat. So what professional networking organizations and associations would you all recommend joining?
All of them. Sorry. So because I work for Octagon, we are part of the OSA network. So we're sports, talent, as well as PR. So any, especially the Black organizations that are the associations that are professional, I would recommend joining truly, because it expands your network and it does provide more opportunity and more insights into the world overall, and also will allow you to have a greater impact.
I would say any networking organization that's tied to what your expertise is also. So for HR, that would be Society of Human Resource Management, because you can also, whether it's in sports or any other arena, just by virtue of knowing other people, you hear about opportunities. So if you're, in accounting, there's the National Association of Black Accountants, organizations like that with like-minded individuals.
And I think that, so I'm not a joiner, so I probably don't do a great job with the associations and the organizations, but what I will suggest though is, to Erica's point, if you are selective in terms of thinking about, so what is it that I want to do, and joining a couple, it allows you to, if you can join and then instead of just being a member, actually get involved so that you can develop a certain skill set. It gives you an additional platform, right? So to say, okay, so here are 3 organizations I'm going to join, but I'm going to make sure that I'm an active member. And whether that means, getting opportunities to contribute to program building or any of those things. So that way, again, you're not just building your resume by adding that organization to your list, you're also getting to develop some additional skills.
Agreed.
And I do want to clarify, I think, the organizations that you participate in actively can be both like the Black professional associations, but also the non-Black ones, right? Like, again, when we talk about the network and how you get your foot in the door, sometimes it may not be a Black person that's going to help, bring you in. So I definitely wouldn't, I wouldn't limit yourself to just the Black professional associations, but yeah, and be an active participant and use whatever your skill set is within the organizations, right? I'm in research, I would do a research for, a She Knows or something like that. But I too am not a joiner, so.
But I think organizations too are also great, because one of the things, and I'm sure, Erica, you and Christina will both say this, is you also have to continue to learn in this space if you want to stay, if you want to keep your job and stay relevant. Sports is an industry that changes constantly. Right. So you've got the historical and institutional part that takes forever to change. Like when you think about MLB and right. But when we think about some of the things that happen day to day, every year you're getting a younger group of players or athletes that are coming in. So there is also this need to continue to stay relevant. So one of the benefits of being, on listservs is that you get the information that allows you to continue to be a lifelong learner.
Yes. So we have another question in here. This is specifically for, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Nyaka? Yes. Okay. So how do you communicate or console with NFL athletes who are not mentally stable or 50-50 with the idea of playing with everything going on in the Black community?
So I do think that now, because all of the clubs have a clinician that's integrated, and what we've seen is that, again, depending on the culture of the club and the clinician, you'd be surprised to see how many of the players are actually using that resource, right? And making sure that they're checking in and getting the support that they need. I think what's been interesting and been helpful this year is clubs are much more willing to make sure that they're facilitating conversations or creating spaces where players can express their concerns about what's going on in the external, what's going on outside of the facility, right, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and also giving them the platform to find some way that they can contribute to making a change, right? So really helping them to think about, okay, so I'm passionate about this. How do I use my platform to make change so that I can, contribute to things becoming better in the Black community? So what as working with the clinicians, basically what we've said is, we're at a time where this is this triple pandemic, right? So you've got COVID, we've got the disparities around who COVID is impacting, right? And so you're in a sport where, again, 70% of the players are African American. And then we have some of the things that are going on as it relates to race. So there's a lot that's going on. And so what we've seen is we've seen each of the clubs and 32 clubs, so they're all handling it differently. But what we've seen is the clubs are actually learning to create spaces where players are able to kind of express that and navigate through that. And I'll say some clubs do a better job of it than others. Some cultures are better at it than others. But what is hopeful for me is, I like to say that I've been in this field for 20 years. 5 years ago, you would not have seen the level of conversations and destigmatization around the mental support that we're seeing now in the professional athlete space. And so that's what makes me optimistic for moving forward.
So we have one more. Okay, no, we have 3 more questions. Has the glamour of the sports industry subsided for any of you now that you all have worked in the industry for some time?
Not for me. Sorry. Do you want to go, Christina?
No, you go.
Not for me. When I was transitioning into HR, it wasn't necessarily sports that I was going after, but after working at Barclays Center in my initial HR role, being there, the energy in the arena in Brooklyn, there's something about it. And I always tell people, like, I loved that job. I loved working there. And it was because of the energy in the arena. And I left for personal growth. I just wanted to do more, but it has enhanced, the glamour for me personally. Transitioning into another organization, working for the league, it's a whole different side, learning so many different things. Like, wow, we see one side as fans, but what goes on behind the scenes to actually make this come to light for the fans has, made it more exciting. And so I think when I left Barclays Center, I knew that I wanted to stay in sports because of what I felt when I was in the arena. And it has only been enhanced. I don't know when I'm going to move on or if I'm going to move on, but I would like to stay in sports, if that means another sports league or a club for any of the other leagues. I mean, it's just been great. So it has not died down at all.
Yeah, for me, coming into sports, I like I said, I was kind of recruited. So I came into sports and I ashamedly now didn't know anything about sports. And I was like, during my interview, I said, I know everything about research and data and I can manage the heck out of a team. I don't know anything about sports. When I say that now to my friends, especially that want to be in sports, they're like, what? I'm like, I know, I'm ashamed now. I'm especially ashamed because I think the absence of sports is what made me truly grow to love it. I don't think I knew how much I needed it. And I'm a New York fan, right? So I'm not a sports fan, but I'm a New York fan, right? I'm from Brooklyn, so for me, it's like, yeah, any New York team that's playing, I'll watch and I'll support them, but I'm not like diehard, have to tune into a game. And I think the absence of sports and now it coming back, I'm like, I didn't even know that I needed it. And I think that's now the glamour that's coming back. It's like, okay, how do we bring it back? How do we get back to that excitement, right? That feeling in the arenas and the stadiums. And furthermore, I think what's making it even more attractive to me right now is that now players are more empowered to speak up, right? And I think seeing the impact, and shameless plug, we just executed a research study about racial injustice in sports. And, leading that measurement has been awesome. And even relaying the results to clients has been amazing because we start to see what fans are expecting from the sports industry and from athletes and how they want them to speak up. And it's so empowering because it really is no longer the shut up and dribble. And it's kind of like looking to these athletes who do have a platform and empowering them even, right? Because I think there has been a time where it was kind of like they didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to insult their fans or insult their sponsors or insult their teams or get backlash from their teams like we saw, with Colin. And it's like right now, it's no longer the separation of the two, right? We're coming to work as ourselves and that is work for them and they're coming as themselves. And we are empowering that. And I think even as fans, we have the opportunity to empower that. So sports has become more glamorous to me I think with the absence of it, and then right now with seeing the true power that it can have in regards to just kind of moving our country along in a positive direction.
So I will say I was a student athlete. I grew up surrounded by sports. So I'll say I don't. There was never the glamour wasn't there. But I also think in my role, it's important for it not to be there, right? So when you think about and as I look at vetting clinicians and people in the community who we want to be able to refer players to, we want to make sure that these are people who don't glamorize this, who see these men as humans and, as, not these superstar athletes, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to actually help them. Right. So I think in this role, what's really, we kind of, you'll see most folks in this space, if you are a fan, it's not a good fit. I'm not going to refer someone to a clinician who's got, the banners or the team paraphernalia, because a player's not going to feel like he can use that he can be his authentic self in that relationship that is so vital. And so and when I do like health and safety committees and bring in outside experts, what we've told them is if you were a fan, when you peel away, when you get to see how the sausage is made, sometimes you're kind of like,
right,
sausage for a while, right?
Right.
So, but so I think for me, what I love is, again, it's an opportunity to support a group that I think that the world sees very differently than who they really are, and again, help them to be their best selves, right? And how do we create a culture and a system that will also allow them to do that? So I think in this space, it's important kind of not to glamorize it. Now, that doesn't mean I don't enjoy the perks, because I will tell you, there's some great perks. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay. So, we have time for one more question, but there's like 4 that are kind of the same. So I'm going to try to wrap it into one. So how can a college student make themselves attractive for hiring managers, as well as how can they get a foot in the door, turn an internship into a permanent job? And are there any current internships out there for women in sports that you would recommend? Anyone can.
I can take a stab at it. In our organization, unfortunately, we had to cancel our summer internship program. We do have interns on a sort of rolling basis, depending on department needs. In terms of college students applying to internships, a lot of organizations understand that you don't have much experience. So the important thing to do is be able to communicate what value you would add based on what you have done. That could be, group projects or talking about life experiences, because everyone's life experiences are different and they add something different. So being open, being flexible, critical thinking is one of those skills that no matter what level you are, is important to have. So I would say to be able to tie in your coursework and your projects to what they're looking for in an intern, having an open mind, taking internships that don't necessarily align with what you necessarily think you want to be doing, because it's also important to experience other lanes. I don't know of any internships for women in sports, but definitely will keep my eyes and ears open and pass that information on to Kadeem or Kaylee or whoever, would accept that information from us to pass on to the college students here.
Yeah, at Cross Octagon, we have more of an event trainee, an account trainee program. So really it's made to train individuals to actually become full-time employees. And I'm going to probably ruin this stat, which our head of HR would kill me for, but I think it's something like 70 or 80% of our event trainees actually get hired onto full-time positions. And it's because we created the program to do such. It's really not meant to be just a come in internship and out. It's really someone learning the business so that we can hire them. Unfortunately, all things COVID has definitely slowed that down. I think every now and then an account trainee comes up depending on the client, if there's like needs with certain sports coming back. But what I would say to really be attractive, I mean, if you're coming into sports, knowing sports really does help. I do think it is a great way to kind of, sit amongst the boys as we think about, how you will work with the rest of the team, and just having that knowledge is something that will most likely put you aligned with another male counterpart that's applying, right? So a lot of the times the guys that are interviewing know sports, right? They're coming in with that sports and, a background, they're coming in with that passion, and that's who you're kind of competing against. So knowing sports really does help. Personally, I did not know sports, but so what I was able to use is and what I would recommend to any college students that are coming up and are applying for the internship or even the full-time role is whatever your skill set is, know that skill set. Be able to apply it to any situation. Like really just know it. Whatever your studies were, highlight any organizations that you were affiliated with that you really did have an active participation in. I know when I'm interviewing, that's my biggest thing, right? I know you don't have the full-time experience, but what did you do, right? If this is a passion for you and this is the job you want, what did you do that got you prepared to be here? And what were the lessons that you learned within it? So even, just communicating some of your failures and how you bounce back is really important too, but showing that the role that you are applying for, that you've already done something within that capacity, and then you're proud of it is a huge thing. I as a hiring person, I want to see the confidence. I want to see the passion. I want to see that you're a dependable person, that I can send you, with a task and you're going to go and get it done. So that's really, I think, some of the best advice that I could give.
And just to piggyback, I'd say WISE, which and again, I'm not a joiner, but I think they do a great job in terms of creating a platform and providing education for women in sports and entertainment. And I don't know if they have sort of a college student arm, but they might. So that might be an area, sort of something to look into. The other thing I would, I tell college students also, be willing to volunteer a little bit during the school year, right? So what are opportunities, where you can go to, I tell college, if you're interested in working, as a sports psychologist, can you go out and volunteer? Can you go and talk to the track and field coach and sort of say, hey, I'm a student, I'm in psychology, here are a couple of things that I can do. But while I think some, if you're not in a position where you can do a work for free or something like that, I think even being able to do something on a consistent basis where, hey, I volunteered at this organization, once a week for the semester last year, and these are the tasks that they provided me, and so those kinds of experiences, I think, also allow you to build up your resume. So then that puts you in a better position when you're looking at internships. But the other thing is the NFL, and I know that the NBA have very similar, I think, internship programs for college students. And I know that the NFL has one specifically for HBCU students as well. So those are options. And then they also have what they call junior rotational programs for people who are coming out of college, where it's 2 years and you kind of get to rotate through every department of the company. So those are also things that I think a lot of the major professional sports organizations have.
And can I just add one last thing? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
For the transition from an internship to a full-time role, I think the best piece of advice that I've received and that I give is, while you're in that internship, raise your hand for other projects. There are always teams that are underwater and can use help. If your internship does not have you tied to one project the whole time, raise your hand, reach out to others, create relationships within the organization, because if they see that you are an asset to the organization and not just this one team, you're going to be top of mind when there's multiple people that are pushing for you to get a role. So raise your hand, volunteer, join the employee resource groups that are there, because then you have a whole, I know our account trainee that was in our Black Employee Network, I was constantly pushing for her to get a full-time role, because literally day one I saw her and I was like, Black girl, come help us. And she like planned this whole event for us. And I was like, we need to hire her. Like, what do I need to do? So raise your hand, do things outside of the job, and you'll find that you have a whole group of people within the organization that are pushing for you.